Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy. If you don't know me by now, I'm a women's confidence and health coach. And today we are pivoting into more about what the online space looks like in perspective of business. And I have a lovely guest with me today. I have Inez Bye, who is a business and mindset coach. And we're going to be diving into understanding better of your zone of genius. And this is exactly how that's Inez's expertise around helping you identify and amplify what is your zone of genius. And she does this by helping clients to simplify their business systems so they have more time to work with clients and make bigger impacts. And that's what we're here for. We're here to change fucking lives, make the best out of everyone and the best of ourselves. So, babe, thank you so much for coming on board.
Hi, super excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. Too often I speak to a lot of business owners and we've been talking a lot about branding, social media, tech, systems, and so forth. But I don't think I've had a conversation with someone yet about what is zone of genius. And I think sometimes it's spread out a lot and people are like, yeah, I get it, but they don't really understand the context of it on the online space and coaching. So I would love for you to explain to our audience what it is and why is it crucial for, small businesses in this field.
Yes, so excited. Yeah, I think you're so right. I think a lot of people kind of are like, oh yes, your zone of genius is like your gifts or what you're good at, but it's so easy for people to dismiss in favor of doing something in a way that's been modeled for them or how their boss tells them to do it or how their parents tell them to do it. So I'm really excited to dive deep into this because there is so much opportunity when you really anchor into what you're naturally good at and don't dismiss it just because it's easy for you doesn't mean it's easy for everyone else. And the first thing I kind of want to do a caveat is like zone of genius is not my original term. I think it's a brilliant term and I wish I came up with it. But it was actually coined by Gay Hendricks and he wrote this book called The Big Leap. And in there, he introduces this whole, I guess, philosophy around the zone of genius. But what I'm going to talk about today is my kind of spin on it and how I specifically use it with my clients in helping them to grow their online business, their impact, their social media, all that kind of stuff. And in terms of like zone of genius and like the way that I define it in the way that I use it with my clients and my business is that it's essentially made up of like your past experiences that contribute to the way that you show up now and in the way that you run your business now and like why you run your business, your natural gifts and like what you feel comes more naturally to you. And again, this is one of those things where it is so easy to overlook it because you just assume, oh, this is fun for me. Why would anyone want to pay me for this? Or why would that be like my kind of unique selling point? And that kind of is like the last, I guess, piece of the puzzle in terms of your zone of genius. It's like your unique selling point. So it's what makes you stand out from all of the other coaches or all of the other candidates, all of the other business owners, all of the other whatever's out there that is so unique to you that helps you to make the impact that like, say, for example, there might be 100 mindset coaches. Your zone of genius is why a client would come to you over all of the other 99 mindset coaches. So it's something that I've been working on kind of refining and figuring out over the last kind of couple of years. Definitely something that I'm still, and I think this is another thing with business as well, in terms of like branding and coming up with your unique selling point and what you want to be known for. It's not something that you just like wake up one morning and you're like, cool, I figured this out. Same with your zone of genius. It's something that you're constantly refining. And as you learn something about yourself or you have an experience or you have an up level in your business or even a failure, you're like, okay, this is teaching me more about what I want to be known for, what my zone of genius is, and what I'm good at and what I don't like as well. So that's kind of like the amalgamation of zone of genius that we can start with from there.
I love the fact that we started this conversation around this because too often what I see is, especially in the online space, and let's talk more about the fitness and health, is I see someone do it and then another person does exactly the same thing, or someone does a photo shoot and all of a sudden the next person does the same photo shoot with the same branding and the same coloring. And it just gets me thinking, where are we in an industry, or are we just so influenced by one another that we're wanting, not necessarily wanting to copy them, but we're inspired and we're thinking, oh, what they're doing is going to work, so I want to do it as well, instead of actually tapping into our natural gifts, as you mentioned, and having a better understanding in it, going, okay, what is inspiring me right now to do the work, but also changing the perception of how we show up.
Yeah, I love this. And that's why I say that within your zone of genius, there's so many opportunities there, because it's like your North Star, essentially. So if you're just like going on social media and you're like, oh, okay, well, this like fit influencer did a photo shoot and that's what I have to do in order to like grow an audience or whatever, to grow a business, then you're missing out on a potential opportunity because you're not listening to what you feel called to do. And that's probably where the abundance and the passion and your magnetism really lies. So the way that I talk about zone of genius is kind of a twofold approach, in terms of like, you might like, there's your zone of genius, but then there's also like your conditioning. So your conditioning is like the beliefs that you have, the experiences that you've had. It's all of the mindset and the inner work. And if you have a really high level of conditioning, it might like stop you from taking action on certain things because you're really stuck in that like people pleasing kind of mindset. So like maybe you know what your zone of genius is, but because you have been like conditioned over years of, you know, with society, your parents, the way that you were brought up with in corporate, whatever, to people please, to always seek for permission outside of yourself, to not trust yourself, then it doesn't really matter if you know what your zone of genius is, because you're always going to look externally to follow someone else and to check, oh, did this influencer do this? Or did this like fit person say that I could eat this? And so that's what it looks like when you don't know what your zone of genius, when you know what your zone of genius is, but you haven't done like the energetic work to decondition yourself from not trusting yourself, essentially. But then on the flip side, someone could have like really like a lower level of conditioning. So at the sense where they're like, yeah, I back myself and I'm confident and I know what I'm doing. They've got a lot of drive, but they don't know what their zone of genius is. And so therefore, then they're just doing a lot of things, but they're not really sure why they're doing all of those things, or they don't really have like an edge, or they kind of just end up blending in, even though they have like the right conditioning, quote unquote. So it's kind of finding a balance between what are your gifts, what are your talents, and ensuring that you have almost the right fuel to get your zone of genius to be able to actually lift and take off. Because if you've got like the mindset blocks, it doesn't matter how clear you are on what your gifts are and what your strengths are, because you won't be able to lift off because you don't have the right fuel of the conditioning. So I don't know if that answers your question, because I got a bit distracted in the middle there, but feel free to ask me any further questions.
It definitely does. And I know a lot of our listeners can relate to the fact that, yeah, they are very headstrong. They have the confidence in showing up as they are as coaches, though they do either lack that instinct or the intuition, the self-trust within themselves to be like, okay, this is the way. And again, like with social media, and I've fallen into this trap multiple times, where you're influenced and inspired by other people and you're like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, let's do that now. And then you're kind of like veered away from your actual mission or the zone of genius, as we're talking. And I would love for you to give us your own experience around this. Like, how did you find yourself within the business and mindset coaching? Was this always a thing for you, or did it kind of like just happen all of a sudden?
Yeah, great question. So I don't know if you know much about human design, but I'm a manifesting generator in human design. So yeah, so we love doing all of the things. We love moving really fast, skipping steps, all of that kind of stuff. And so I initially got into business coaching because at first I was a personal trainer. Then I moved into intuitive eating coaching. Then I moved into life coaching. It's so many, Jen. And during the pandemic, when everything was like shutting down, I had an influx of clients asking me, can you start doing business mentoring with me? And I was like, okay. So it happened very organically. And then I just found a real passion for it. And what I focused on doing with those clients was that I was helping them to become to simplify their business systems, as we were saying before, and really optimize the way that they were running their business. Because a lot of people I find will be doing a lot of stuff back end, like they're planning a lot, they're fucking around on Canva, they're researching, they're watching YouTube videos, they're listening to podcasts, all things that are necessary to an extent, but people are swinging the pendulum way too far and spending so much time learning and researching and digesting information that they're then actually not executing on it. And so something that could take them a day ends up taking them 2 months, you know? So then they think that they're moving slow, but it's just the approach that they had. And so in order to show them what it was that was going to make their business system more efficient, I would be like, hey, this is what you need to focus on, because clearly this is your skill. Clearly this is like what you're good at. Cut out all of this other random shit and focus on these things that are actually moving the needle. And so that's kind of how it first started, because I'm a real lover of like optimization, simplifying things, making things efficient. Like even just in my everyday life, I'll like go to the coffee shop and I'll see the, you know, waitress doing something and I'm like, oh my God, that is so inefficient. And I can just like, it's like that beautiful mind scene where I can like see an alternate universe and I'm like, oh, this could be such a better way to do things. And I've just always been like that in like, you know, with any business that I've run or within my family, or, you know, I'm always the person within my family that like orders everything because I just like understand how it works in a streamlined way, like when we go out to restaurants and stuff like that. So I was kind of like looking at my past experiences and thinking about what I was good at, not only in a business sense and like kind of really reflecting on the clients that I'd worked with that had gotten really good results and that I had really loved, and starting to collect a bucket of things that I was like really passionate about, but also observing things in my life outside of business that I was also really passionate about. So those examples of like seeking out efficient ways of life in other areas, or things that I was just doing naturally. And like my friends always come to me when they want like a quick and easy solution. Like I've always said that if like your dress breaks or your shoe breaks, I'm the kind of person that you want there, because I can like really easily and quickly figure out how to put it together, and I'll find someone's hairband and make it work and whatever. And so I'm doing this kind of like researching and just observing the feedback that I'm getting from friends, the feedback that I'm getting from clients, asking my clients what it is about me that makes them want to work with me, which is a huge underused resource for a lot of us as coaches when we're thinking about what am I even good at. Ask your clients. So many people just, it's a bit of a blind spot for them. And this is all over a period of like a year, I would say, where I'm like, what is my thing? Like, what's my edge? What do I, like, if I could have a video that would go viral, like, what would I want it to be, kind of thing? That is such a good question to ask yourself when trying to knuckle down on what your zone of genius might be. And then I kind of came to this idea of like, okay, I love efficiency. I love simplifying things. I love getting shit done, moving faster. And there was still this ongoing question of like, but how do I know what tasks that need to get cut out? How do I know what tasks are actually going to move the needle in business or in any area of life, like whether you're meal prepping or going to the gym or whatever, that are actually going to get you closer to your goals? And then it's kind of like one day I just like stumbled across this idea of like, and I was thinking about a few client case studies of like the zone of genius, like what was the thing that made it different? So for example, I've had a client come to me and she was a life coach, and she really wanted to start, she was talking a lot about empowerment and confidence, and she had already kind of built a successful business based off that. But she came to me and she was like, I really want to start talking more about trauma healing and shadow work. But she was concerned that that was going to make her seem too like dark and unrelatable and people weren't going to get it. And she was really concerned about like judgment and being isolated from her audience. And so we had to do a lot of the work around the conditioning of like letting go of the need to be understood and like the fear of being rejected, and really neutralizing all of those emotions and kind of, doing the inner child work of where that fear was seated. And she got to this place where she started to really knuckle down on like talking about shadow work more and talking about the benefit of it and talking about why it was going to help make her clients' lives even easier. And even though the outcome of like talking about empowerment versus trauma healing, the outcome of those two is still to like feel more at peace and have more confidence and to be more grounded and to have better relationships. Like the outcome for those two are still quite similar, but the way in which you get to that outcome is different. And because she was more passionate and aligned with talking about the shadow work and the trauma healing side of things, her Instagram literally blew up. Like she went from like 1,000 followers to 50,000 followers in a couple of weeks. She sold out her first group program, which was all around shadow work. And now she, continuously sells out that signature group program, is making more money than ever before, traveled all over the world. And to me, that experience was right before I kind of figured out how I wanted to like express this method that I take my clients through. And when I went through that experience with her and saw the incredible results with her, I was like, well, it's because she had her unique angle. And so then I was kind of like, that's her zone of genius. That's kind of how it works. And so just to keep something in mind with this is like, you don't have to wait to figure out your zone of genius before taking action on things, because it's the execution and the trial and error that actually gives you the clarity and the firsthand evidence of like, cool, that worked for that person, this works for this person. And it was also what was working for me. It just took me a while to figure out what is that thing and how do I want to create like a nice sentence around it, basically, that encapsulates everything that I do.
It's so good to be able to have those moments of yourself, like, you know, your progress, but also notice the progress of your clients as well. And too often people will be hearing this story and be like, fuck yes, I want that. But we know for a fact it wasn't an overnight success. You know, it was time of her doing the coaching with you, you know, practicing the inner work, whether it's the shadow work, the child work, whatever it is, there would have been like a timeline of her, you know, focusing on neutralizing everything. And then once she found it, she was able to just fucking rocket fire.
Yeah, exactly. And like, same thing happened with me. Once I figured out like the zone of genius, I really started like going ham on talking about that topic all the time. And again, this is where a lot of business owners block their success, because they're like, yep, this is what I want to be known for. This is like my thing. But then they only ever mention it like really in passing on their stories, or just like a flippant comment somewhere hidden in like the depths of their caption. And it's like, that's not how you get known for things. You need to start talking about this like at a high frequency, putting it into any kind of caption, into all of your reels, your carousels, like put it in there as much as you can, because otherwise people aren't going to remember. It's not going to stick in your minds. And if it doesn't stick in the client's mind, then it's not going to work. People aren't going to come to you. But what happened with me is once I fully was just like, okay, I'm going to commit to this idea. It's like good enough for now, and I'm going to see where we go with it. I was speaking about it for a month, and then off the back of that, I decided to launch my membership, which is basically like a year-long access to all of my courses and programs. And it was called the Ministry of Genius. And like, that just made so much sense for people to jump into, because I had already done the groundwork to make it known and do the awareness around why Zone of Genius was important as well. And so that it just like was so easy for people to jump into that, because they were so familiar with the concept as well. And but because of that, as you were saying, because I'd given it time to allow people to get familiar with the concept, to allow myself to get really familiar with the concept, it felt really grounded, rather than just waking up and being like, I want to identify with this cool saying, everyone sign up to my program tomorrow. It's like, if you really just give it like, you know, a couple of months and really allow yourself to build a reputation that's based on a unique selling point, your gifts, your zone of genius, you are going to create so much more success for yourself that way. And it's going to sell itself. Like now people come into my DMs and they're like, I need to know what my zone of genius is. Like, how can I work with you? And that's because I've created that awareness, and now it's working for me without me even having to do anything.
Let's talk about reputation and building that momentum around selling your services, because you mentioned a really good point where people will know exactly what they do, but then when it comes to actually selling and proposing their offers and whatsoever, as you mentioned, it would kind of be like a bypass story, or like at the bottom of a post. Like, what are some things aside from that? What are other some things that you notice and you're like, fuck, like, let's do better?
Let's do better. I would say like often I go onto people's Instagram pages and I'm like, I get that you're a life coach, or I understand that you're a nutritionist, but like, I don't really get what you do or who you work with. And I know we hear that a lot in like the online business space, the entrepreneur space, of like, know your client avatar. And that's important, but also like what your like philosophy is, what your values are. Like people can come onto my page and like understand very quickly what it is that I stand for. And that's why it's really easy for people to follow me, to reach out to me, to DM me and work with me like in quite quick succession. But if you're a life coach, for example, and then you're talking about journaling, and then over here you're talking about figuring out like a career change. And like, there's all these different topics that are so like, I'm a mammy gen, right? I love talking about lots of different topics completely, but we need to find a way to have like one thread that brings them all together. Mm-hmm. And so for example, with my client that I was mentioning with her, it's like all of her topics come back to this idea around like shadow work and trauma healing and embodiment practices. So even if she's talking about lots of different topics, she's always finding a way to like bring it together. And then that makes your online presence so much more memorable and appear a lot more like premium and legit, because when you have like a unique selling point, like you've got something that you stand for, people remember you, it sticks in their minds, and they can understand what your skills are and what you like have to offer essentially. And so like really tangible, easy ways that you can do it. And if you go onto my Instagram page, you'll see it, is whenever I'm like creating a carousel, I'll always just put somewhere zone of genius hack or like zone of genius tip. And it's so easy to do that, but it's what then makes people remember you. And it's how you can kind of start to like, it's almost like, I always say this to my clients, it's like starting a nickname for yourself. It feels a bit stupid at first and you're like, oh, am I really going to continuously bring this up? But then eventually it starts to become part of the like common rhetoric around your page, and then everyone starts to talk to you about it, and you're like, cool, this is so great, the work is doing it for me. And you can even think about it like, you know, and this kind of goes more into branding, but like even having like a color that you use all the time. So mine's very much like green and yellow, which is so random. Like I don't even know how I landed on those colors, because if you'd asked me last year, my favorite color was blue. But anyway, here we are, we're always changing and evolving. And like now people send me photos of green walls or green outfits or green couches, and they're like, this is so you. And that's so sick, because now the color green is working for me and I don't even have to do anything, but I'm getting brought up into people's minds. And so they're thinking about me more. I'm more top of mind. And that means as soon as someone's ready to invest in me, I'm going to be right forefront center of their attention, and they're going to go to me, because they've forgotten about all of the other people that are just talking about any random topic, don't have any kind of, you know, and I'm not saying that you need to do a photo shoot or you need to do like hectic graphics, but some way to make yourself identifiable and memorable is so important. And connecting your zone of genius to that is what really, makes you memorable.
It's so true in regards to the branding side of things. People do remember you if you're constantly, like I have this rule, it's not a matter of like being constant messaging, but consistent messaging.
Yeah.
And if it's consistent around your branding and your messaging, then of course people are going to remember you. Of course they're going to reach out. So, and again, it brings back to the zone of genius. It's having a better understanding of what you stand for and doing it. I love the fact also that you mentioned how with man gens, and I was like laughing here when you said that we want to talk about everything and anything. We find it so inspirational to, you know, talk about plants or talk about bottles or talk about nail polish, like whatever fucking comes to our mind, we just want to do it. And I find myself that I really need to like hold myself back when I'm wanting to talk about random shit. And again, it can be fucking random, but you could also randomize it into your own zone of genius, like relate it back to it. And honestly, I feel that's where a lot of people struggle with that, because like, I want to talk about all the things. I'm like, yeah, cool. But like, how can you relate it to your messaging?
Yeah, bang on. It's like, I've been doing this series recently on my Instagram where I talk about like how your zone of genius creates more premium offers. And so the other day I was speaking about, here's a $20 retinol versus like $140 retinol. And it's like, I can talk about skincare and I can talk about my experience buying it, but I'm bringing it back to the zone of genius, which is relevant for my client. The same goes with, you know, I spoke about the other day buying like a $20 artisan donut as opposed to like a $1 one from Kohl's or whatever. And so because I'm bringing it all, linking it all back, it makes sense within my brand. And it's not to say that you can't have variety and share your personal story. Like I'm always sharing stuff about, I just moved house, we just got a sausage dog. Like, yes, of course you can have your personality on there, but you also need to be thinking about how you want to be perceived by your audience. And so if you're just using your Instagram as like a diary where you just share every thought that comes to your mind, it's going to come across pretty scattered and you're not going to be perceived as someone that's worthy of a high investment. again, this isn't to say that you can't ever be vulnerable. I've definitely shared with like mistakes or blockages that I'm working through or failures that I've had. And I really recommend doing that. And at the same time, I also ask myself, is this something that I want to be remembered for? When people think of me, do I want them to think about this story first? And that really helps me to filter the way that I show up on social media in a way that is from a position of like leadership and trust and like embodiment of what I'm selling. And if I want to have a rant about something, or I need to vent or share something, take it to the group chat, take it to your, you know, like your text your friend or something like that. And I think people need to understand the difference between being authentic and vulnerable and just like divulging all of their personal secrets, because that really waters down your message. And it also takes away from your authority that makes people want to invest in you, especially if you want to get people to invest like a higher ticket into your business.
With all that being said, we know with a zone of genius that I feel as if that is like one of the core systems for building a successful business, because you know you're at the top of the triangle knowing exactly what you're needing to talk about, and then the rest just like flows through. And I know you're very big about helping online coaches optimize their business, not just through this zone of genius, but also through systems as well. And you've spoken about this many times about how you're helping simplify these systems for clients. And I would love to know from your experience, not just as a business coach, but also helping your clients, like what are some specific benefits does this bring to them, or in terms of like, you know, time management and the impact that they're making on their clients?
Yeah, I love this. And just to kind of define systems, because I feel like whenever I used to say this to my clients, I'd be like, I don't have any systems. How can we make them more efficient? And I'm like, systems is basically just like the tasks that you do all day, every day. And how can we like systemize them? Like, how can we make them into more streamlined tasks so that when you go to launch something, for example, you're like, cool, this is what I need to follow step by step, so that I'm not missing anything, so that I'm maximizing the launch, so that I'm maximizing my time. And I also know that what I'm doing is going to work. And that's basically making systems more efficient is number one, actually having systems. So like, instead of whenever you go to launch something, you're just like, I'm just going to try this different way, or I'm just going to throw up a few stories and see what happens. Of course, business is all a constant experiment, but within an experiment and within like flowing and trying things out, there needs to be some safe containers and some structures so that there's actually somewhere for the energy to flow, right? So that there's actually ways that people can pay you, so that you can actually measure what was successful, what didn't work, and then kind of adjust things and move forwards from there. So the main things that I would say is like, as I mentioned before, a lot of people are focusing a lot on like planning and thinking about things and reflecting and refining. And it's like, what is actually going to get you the results is taking action on the thing. So it's looking at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and asking yourself and being really honest. And, you know, generally what I do with my clients is I'm like, tell me what your to-do list is. And they'll be like, oh, I've got to like send out invoices, and then I've got to write out a website page, and then I've got to send out this email thing. And I'm like, babe, all of this stuff is not that important. Like, you know, for example, a big thing a lot of my clients do, and if you're listening to this, you will be like, fuck yeah, I need to change this. Don't be sending out invoices to your clients. Have an automatic system for that. There's literally programs that automate it all for you. And if you can automate as much as possible, that's how I run my business. Like, I don't currently have any like support team. I work with them on a project basis, but like, you know, I don't currently have anyone because I automate everything. So like, for example, all of my payments are automated. I've got like a, you know, system that manages all of my courses and payments and all that kind of stuff. You can use Calendly, kind of how we booked this call, incredible. So we're not going back and forth with times. I've got all of my money on like an automated system so that I get paid into one bucket account. That's like my business account. And then it just automatically disperses into like my tax account, my savings account, my spending account, my whatever account. And I don't have to like look at anything. Like, I can go weeks without looking at my bank account because it's all sorted out, you know? So, and the same goes, obviously those are things that you can automate. You can't automate everything, but then once we've automated everything, then you've got a little bit more time freedom again. And there's often sometimes my clients are really resistant to letting go of it because they're like, oh, if I send the invoice, then I know it's going to get paid. And if I do it on a payment plan, then like maybe they won't have money in their account. And it's like, how long do you think you're going to be able to babysit your clients in a way that's going to be sustainable for your business to grow? Because once you have more than like a handful of clients, you don't have time and energy to fuck around with that kind of energy. And that energy is such a babysitting energy. But when people feel like they're in control and it gives them like a task, they're like, oh, but I feel like it's, you know, I'm busy, I'm worthy. It's like overcomplicating things so that they feel more worthy of the business success. But then they're really kind of hanging on to the lowest hanging fruit, as opposed to what can I do to move the needle forwards in the business. So then we want to look at what's your standard operating procedures, if you want to get a bit of corporate lingo into it, for launching. How do you approach launching a free masterclass? How do you set up a masterclass? How do you know your onboarding systems for your clients? All that kind of stuff you need to be really solid and grounded in, because without any of that stuff, your nervous system is going to be like, oh, I don't want to take on any clients because I don't know what to do with them once they sign up, or, oh, I don't want to launch something because it feels so overwhelming because you haven't just figured out. And I don't even write any of this stuff down. I just know what it is. And I just rinse and repeat it. And I'm like, cool, I know that this is how I do a masterclass, and this is how I launch this offer. And this is how I, this is like generally how I create my content. So the same thing for that. I guess I would probably say the caveat is that I don't need to write anything down, because a lot of the stuff I've taught in courses for my clients. So technically it is written down, but I just don't write it down like personally. But all my clients get access to it. So, but in terms of like content creation as well, we want to look at how can we ensure that your content is getting seen by the maximum amount of people? Because oftentimes people's reaction will be, oh, I'm just going to post more content. And it's like, well, more content is not necessarily better. Or they're like, I'll just post more stories. I'll give more value on my stories, whatever. And it's like, more is not always better if what you're currently doing isn't being maximized. So instead of just doing more and blindly hoping that will work out, that's where we get to make it more efficient and think about how can we maximize what you're already doing before we add on more. So we look at the social media and we think about, are you doing different styles of content? Like, do you have conversion content? Do you have growth content? Do you have enough selling content? Do you have like the right call to actions? Do you have hooks? Are you using keywords? All of this kind of stuff, ensure that's ticked off, and then we can look at going more. But what my basic mantra for everything is like, don't just do more, do it better, so that you can amplify the amount of like eyes and sales and spots that you're making and all that kind of stuff first, and then we can kind of add on from there. And that's really what I mean when I talk about making systems more efficient and simplified.
I love everything about that. And on a point with the content side of things, what I mentioned before, it's not always about the constant messaging, but it's the consistency. And I feel as if that needs to be like post noted on everyone's fucking forehead right now, to just understanding it's not a matter of you doing 3-4 posts a day. It's like, if they're bringing value and it's educational, then yeah, of course there's context behind it, and you're going to lead more people into your space. But if you're just, throwing everything at the fucking wall, then of course nothing's going to eventuate from it. And another good point you made about babysitting clients. I see this very often. I've been there in the past when I first started my personal training business, and I fell into invoicing them all the time and having that fucking anxiety of going, are they going to pay me? Am I going to be able to pay my rent and so forth? So it's just like going back to the automation side of things and making sure that, you are dealing with adults. And if those adults don't come to the party, then it's having that hard conversation. And I would love to know, have you experienced this? And I'm assuming you've helped clients around this, but what are some things that could help our listeners if they are coming across this?
Like working with babysitting clients that they find themselves babysitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I used to be so anxiously attached to my clients. Like if they sent me a voice memo, I'd be like, oh my God, I've got to respond to them like ASAP. Otherwise they think they're not going to be getting value from this container. Or, if they didn't respond to me within a few days, I'd be like, they hate me. They think I'm a bad coach, whatever. I used to take everything so fucking personally. And what that would do is create a really codependent relationship with my clients, where they really struggle to like move forwards or get anything done without my help. And like, I think that fed into me kind of being the savior and having all the answers, and like, you know, just fed into my ego in a way. But also that's such an unsustainable way to run a business, because you can only work with so many clients in that way. And what started to happen is I started to really resent my clients, because I was like, why are you not taking action? Like, we have the same conversations every single week about the fact that you need to do this or have this conversation or set this boundary. And every single week you're still coming to me saying how hard it is and how sad you are, and basically being in victim mode. But also that was partly my responsibility, because I'd set up a container where it was safe for them to just like sit back, and I'd hold their hands and tell them it was okay. And that's not what's going to get them results. Like, it might feel good in the short term, and it might feed into your ego to be like, oh, they need me and they want to work with me. But long term, they're not going to get results. They're not going to keep signing up with you, and they're not actually going to create the transformation. And that's also going to then feed into you not believing in your coaching, because you're like, why aren't these people changing, right? And from a nervous system perspective, again, if those clients are feeling so heavy and you're having to like really slog it out to get them to do anything, and it's so much work, then your nervous system, even though like logically you're like, fuck yeah, give me 10 more clients, I want to be a millionaire. From an energetic standpoint, if it already feels really hard and you're already starting to feel really overwhelmed and like anxious and drained by clients, then you're going to be energetically blocking bringing on those clients, because it already feels like so much responsibility. It already feels like so much work. And so therefore, you're not going to be a match for more clients. And the trap I find people getting into is where they recognize I'm babysitting my clients and they're not aligned for me, and I want to kind of speak to a new level of client, but they continue to create content that speaks to the clients that they're currently at. And so you're speaking to the problems that you're solving with your current clients, and then getting confused as to why you keep bringing on those clients, because it's a whole different mindset shift to be bringing in clients that are self-led, that are premium, that are ready to take the action. You're speaking to people that like already get it. You're not trying to convince them why it's important to do a morning routine, or why they need to post, or, you know, whatever thing. It's not that kind of like beginning learning phase of like how to understand things. It's like talking to people that are like, you already get it, you're already putting in the work, and now you want to elevate, now you want to upgrade. And that's where the way that you speak in your content, it can be such a subtle shift in terms of the verbiage that you use, but it can make such a difference in terms of the clients that you bring into your coaching business. And what's really important is that if you want to work with clients that are like self-led and premium and kind of are willing to take responsibility for their own results, you need to also ensure that you're creating the space that supports that. So for example, being really clear with like the boundaries that you have with your clients, being really clear with how they should be using the container. So this kind of comes back to the systems chat that we were having a moment ago. Whenever a client signs up with me, they get a whole Google sheet on how to use the container, how to get the most out of it, what to do if they feel down, any boundaries, and just really make it so clear so that they feel really safe and held by the container. Your energy as the coach is protected, and that already instantly will make you a match for more of a client that is willing to take responsibility for their results, rather than just wanting to crawl up in your hand and be like, do all the work for me. So I think it's not so much, and you can sometimes have conversations with clients. Like, definitely I've had conversations sometimes with clients where I'm like, we've had this same conversation multiple times, and I really want the best for you. So I want to know why you feel like it's difficult for you to take action. You know, having those conversations can be really confronting, but can also be such a moment of deep connection with the client, because you're forcing them to see things in a way that they probably wouldn't have to otherwise. And it's really, it's really important the way that you frame that sentence. If you're going into them being like, why aren't you doing this? Or what's going on with you? Or you still haven't completed this task. Obviously, they're going to feel really attacked, and they're most likely going to be like, fuck off, I'm not paying you. And they're not going to refer you to any of their friends, right? But there's a way that you can do it that holds them to a really high standard with love, and calls them forward to actually make the change that they signed up to work with you on. So like, you can say things like, I've noticed that you're not having this conversation with this person. What's coming up for you? Or like, I've noticed that you seem to talk down on yourself often in this messenger container, and that's not really what this messenger container is for. So talk to me about what's going on here and how you feel like we can use this in a way that's going to get you the best results. And that is a next level of coaching that a lot of coaches don't do. They'll just like let go of clients when they aren't aligned, or, you know, they'll just wait until their coaching agreement runs out, which is fine. You know, not everyone is ready to have those conversations, but to really step into that next level of coaching and really create like major transformations, asking those sort of questions and being willing to be upfront with love with your clients can create an incredible relationship and call them forwards, especially if you notice that you're going through that phase where you're like, I've got a few clients that are a bit in their victim. I'm in this transition phase where I'm wanting to bring in more like self-led clients. That's how you can start to bring those clients with you. And either they won't be into it, and that's fine. And then you're allowed to grow out of it and evolve. That's going to happen. Or they'll be like, fuck yes, I've wanted to grow. I felt stale. I'm ready for this next iteration with you. Thank you for bringing this up.
It's such a powerful way of being able to communicate that effectively to clients. And as you mentioned, with attracting a new way of clients, we want to be speaking a different language as well.
Yeah.
And we notice that a lot of people are wanting to bring in other types of people into the container. You know, let's say, you know, someone finishing with fitness and they're wanting to do mindset. So like, that's a whole another way of talking to a client. But if we're constantly still talking about fitness, of course, you're going to still attract people who are going to come and want to work with you for fitness wise. It's so interesting that we're having this conversation, because I'm noticing a shift within the online space where people are shifting and navigating the way they communicate with their clients, but online as well. What are some things that you've noticed yourself that you've made changes?
In terms of like communicating with my clients in sessions or in my social media, or in what kind of way? I would say that clients that it's so different because I've worked with so many different clients, but what I would really say is something that, actually, which way do I want to go with this question? I would say now more than ever, in terms of the way that you market your business, you need to be really clear with not only what it is that you are going to get your clients, but also your zone of genius. Like, why should they come to you, essentially? When I first started my business like 5 years ago, the online coaching space was like definitely there, and you know, it was happening, but it was nowhere near as big as it is now. And so I could just like post things like, I've got 2 free spaces for coaching, and I could kind of like attract clients in off the vibe and like excitement and just like a bit of YOLO energy, if you will. Whereas now people are a lot more wary in the way that they are investing, and they're just being more intelligent with how they spend their money. And so again, this can get people really discouraged, where they're like, oh, it used to be so easy to make sales. And I see a lot of chat online about how people are like, oh, my business, it's so hard, I'm struggling. And it's like, are you struggling, or are you just not evolving and you're trying to use tactics that worked 2 years ago and they're not working anymore? Like, that's the online space. You came into the online space because you wanted that evolution, so evolve. And so I would say that for a lot of people, it's not harder to run a business now. It just requires you being really clear and really like super articulating what it is that you have to offer and why people should come to work with you. And I wouldn't say that necessarily the conversations inside my coaching business have changed so much, because once they're in, you're having kind of similar conversations, but it's more the communication that brings someone in needs to be at a level where someone will want to invest high ticket, where someone does want to trust you to spend their hard-earned dollars in. And people are not just buying things from a place of like being impulsive, like especially with coaching. Like, yes, of course, if you want to buy like, I don't know, like a t-shirt or one of those Stanley drink bottles, whatever, people are buying those impulsively, but not with coaching, because it's much higher ticket than that. And it's a big commitment, both emotionally and financially. So you need to ensure that the language you're using, the way that you are communicating, and how you are showing up on social media. So like the photos that you use, the content that you share, the way that you like, you know, the way that your content looks, all that kind of stuff. Again, it doesn't have to be a photo shoot, but it also needs to have some element of being like elevated, so that people are like, cool, this person's a legit business. Like, I can see that they are running the real deal here, essentially. Because otherwise there is another coach that they will go to that has like clearer language, a more obvious skill set. The value is there. Why wouldn't they invest in you, right? And this is why I'm also so passionate about helping others identify their zone of genius, because when you know what you're good at, there is no competition. You're like, yeah, there can be a million business coaches for me, for example, but I know what I can offer. I know how I can fill a gap in people's knowledge that makes me really valuable. And that's when people will pay extra for you. So the example I always use is when you go to the GP, like the doctor, you pay them, I don't know, $100 and you go there for general health advice, right? But when you go to a specialist, it's generally because you really need something and you can't like go anywhere else for it because it's a specialty skill. And when I went to the specialist recently, I went to a speech pathologist and I paid $100 for the GP and I paid like $350 for the speech pathologist. That's 3.5 times more simply because this person has a more specialized skill set. And so if we look at that in relation to your business, then it's like, how can I use my skill set, which is your zone of genius, which is basically, just like I said before, the experiences that you've had, the qualities that come naturally to you, and your natural strengths, the way that you like to do things that contribute to the way that you show up in your business. And people will want to pay you more for that because the perceived value is higher. It's got its more unique angle and it's really obvious exactly how you can help people. So it's like the difference between, you know, if I'm a working mom that has 2 children and doesn't have any time and I'm looking for a personal trainer, there might be Sally over here as a personal trainer, or there might be Joe over here that's a personal trainer for moms who are working and are time poor and can only work out at home. Like, obviously, if I'm that mom, I'm going to go for the person that really understands me. And that's the beautiful thing about the coaching space. It can be so niche and specialized, but you actually have to talk about that and speak about it in a way that people are going to understand in order for them to be like, oh, I can connect the dots as to why I would pay you. And people are always like wanting to pay for their problems to be solved. And so it's just a matter of connecting you to them. And I get the pleasure of doing that with my clients every single day.
Fuck yes to that. I love that. So good. What are the plans for 2024? Let me specify that question. How are you going to evolve in 2024?
Wow, big question. Well, one of the main things that I am doing in the business right now is I am really thinking about like the longer term vision in terms of like where I want to take it. And it's funny because this is something that I've had so much resistance to doing because I'm a manager. I want to just spontaneously do things. I don't have any plans. I'll take wherever the wind takes me, I'll go. But that only gets you so far. And if you want to grow a really big business and have a big impact, you need to start creating a bit more of a map for like what that is actually going to look like. What is the structures that are actually going to take you there? How can you have the channels for people to pay you? And so what we're really going to be focusing on is my online presence. So really upping the game with my content and my social media, especially with video content, and being really, again, intentional with how each piece of content fits into my brand, as opposed to just being like, oh, this is a cool topic, this could be helpful. I'm really going to think about how I can create a really memorable, strong online presence. We're also going to be kicking it up a notch in terms of like bringing people into the Ministry of Genius membership. I feel like people are really craving spaces online where they can bring people together and have that sense of connection. And like, your community is fucking everything. If you've ever been to a Pilates class or any sort of group fitness class and everyone you can tell is being like a bit slack and whatever, everyone stops doing the plank when the teacher's like, okay, hold the plank for as long as you can. But if everyone is like staying up and holding the plank, everyone else stays up. It makes such a fucking difference to the community that you're in. And I just know that there's a real big demand for like people having those community spaces. And so we're really going to be drilling down on the Ministry of Genius membership. And with the evolution of my brand as well, I've had this long time running mastermind, and it's been called the Scale Mastermind for so long. But I came up with that name, literally no thoughts, just vibes. I was like, yeah, this name feels good. And I just kind of set it up very ad hoc. And we are just currently in the back end going through a massive evolution of what that space is going to look like, what that name is going to look like. And again, I think it would be so easy as a business owner for me to be like, well, it's working, why would I change it? But it doesn't reflect the vision that I have for my business. And so I want to upgrade it and take it from good to great. And so that's something I want people to keep in mind with their own business, is like, even if things are going good, don't become complacent, because that can be taken away from you. And then on a more personal side, I'm going to 2 retreats next year, which is super exciting. I'm going on my first ever solo retreat in April. So I'm really, really excited for that. I'm actually really fucking nervous for it too, but I think it should be really good. And then aside from that, we'll see what else comes up. I'm open to all the opportunities, universe.
Bring all the opportunities. Well, it's gonna be a big 2024, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have taken a lot of gold nuggets today, especially around the zone of genius, but also how to be able to communicate better with their clients as well, and having the messages come across authentically.
Thank you so much, Siggy. This was such a fun chat.
It was so good. Thank you so much for joining me. And girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you tag us and let us know what you thought.